Welcome to Nuanced Conversations, the podcast where depth meets dialogue, hosted by Dr. George E. Hurt. This show explores the gray areas of life, where faith, wisdom, and real-world complexities intersect. No easy answers, just honest conversations that challenge, inspire, and inform. Get ready to lean in, listen closely, and explore the nuance. This is Nuanced Conversations.
Welcome to another episode of Nuanced Conversation Podcast. My name is George Hurt. I am the creator and curator of this safe space to have nuanced conversations here. We don't operate in the black and white. We're comfortable with the gray, thus nuance. The aim to be open, honest, intelligent in this space, as well as hitting topics from religion, politics, social norms, and pop culture. And we have a special guest with us on today, the renowned pastor.
Creator and curator. Curate, Reverend, curate.
Yeah. Let me swear you in. This is just a playful thing we do at the beginning, that you'll be open, honest, and transparent in this time together in Nuanced Conversations.
It doesn't matter which hand.
The right hand is preferred, but don't worry about it. He tells the truth all the time, so he didn't really swear all the way in. Man, how you feeling?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. This is incredible. I appreciate the name, because often the truth is in the nuance.
It absolutely is, especially in church context. We find ourselves looking for black and white, right, wrong, good, evil, when oftentimes it's somewhere in the middle. It's that groove in the middle. As most things in life, is not yes or no. It's somewhere in the middle as well.
I take it.
Tell us a little bit about where you're from and your journey into your Christian faith.
Whew. Man, how much time you got? It's a complicated question.
Well, where are you from?
That's a complicated question. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So I was born in Brooklyn, New York.
Listen at you.
Mercy Hospital. However, so I claim New York as my ancestral homeland, right?
Okay.
But my father was a pastor in the AME Church. AME stands for African Methodist Episcopal. And AME Church, unlike the Baptist Church or Pentecostal Church, they don't vote on pastors.
We're not elected, y'all appointed.
Not elected, appointed by the bishop. And once you are ordained, the bishop can send you to wherever he or now she decides. The logic is godly judgment. As you can imagine, sometimes the logic is neither godly,
politics, personalities.
Sometimes guys, occasionally, but
beef.
Ideally, the idea is they try to take the gifts, talents, and skills, calling of the pastor, match it with the needs, the geography, the preferences of the church, theoretically. It doesn't always work out that way, but you go in knowing that that's an option, and so it has enormous impact on you as a pastor and your family. Hit my family particularly hard. Well, I don't know if particularly hard, because I guess if you talk to most AMEs, we've all had, who grew up AME, we've all had a similar journey. So my father pastored 18 churches over 52 years in 12 states.
Wow. So you were born in Brooklyn.
I was born in Brooklyn.
There long.
Was there 4 years, and my dad was assigned to a church in Boston. He was there 4 years, then Freeport, New York, then Queens, New York, then Far Rockaway, New York, then Long Island, New York, then Buffalo, New York.
But you were in the East Coast.
Yeah, principally.
You're in the East Coast, so you got the East Coast flavor, East Coast swag, even though you're changing schools.
Yeah, went to high school. Went to elementary school in Long Island, high school in Queens. I used to pump gas and run the MC car.
Oh, wow.
That was before hip-hop was hip-hop.
Gotcha.
And so, actually, 50 Cent, so he's doing the power thing, but then there's a pre-show. I forget the name of it, but it's in the Power trilogy. I forget the name of the show, but it basically tells.
I just read the Bible and pray, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on, man, let's have a nuanced conversation. but I forget which show it is. But it basically was about his upbringing in Queens.
Okay.
Because actually,
his movie. Are you talking about his movie?
No.
Get Rich or Die Trying?
No. He has a series of shows on Stars. You know,
Power.
started with Ghost Power,
Yeah.
but then there's one show in the Power series. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah, it goes back to his life.
But it goes back to his life.
Yeah.
But basically, like that neighborhood is not far from where I grew up.
Where you grew up, got you.
And so, you know, born in Brooklyn was basically, but my formative years were really Long Island, went to high school in Queens, and then went to college in Atlanta. So basically, the most part, I'm from New York. That's what I claim.
How are you connecting with church at this point? Are you adapting to the church world? Are you this child prodigy as a preacher, or are you this rebel?
I'm fully immersed in it.
You're fully immersed in it.
It was weird. My brother probably was the rebel. You know, he saw Roots, I think, when he was like in third grade, and you know, it just
do that to you, Roots in third grade.
He started hating white people. You know, me in terms of nuance, I was sitting there saying, well, how come he just didn't say his name was Toby? You know, I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I never had the antagonistic relationship to church that my brother did. I love church. In fact, I'd be talking in the back, but when it was preaching time, I was like, shh.
It's time to be quiet.
Man, I loved it. I wanted to be a rapper, actually. This was before rap was like a career. I just thought it was cool. In fact, we used to do house parties. I was a part of Triple Threat MCs. I was Almighty J Love.
Oh, really?
Guaranteed to rock you to a level that none other could ever stop you.
Well, thank God for intervention and
I'm trying to tell you, the lyrics were real whack.
Yeah.
But that's what I thought it was going to be. And I got actually, my mother kept on bugging me because she wanted me to be a part of this, what they call Youth of the Year contest, which was basically an oratorical contest or whatever. Yeah. So I really didn't want to do it, but just to shut her up, I deliberately did not prepare, got up and just spoke, and
did a great job.
Won, and out of that I discerned my calling. So at
How
17,
old are you at
17? At 17, I preached my trial sermon, October 13th, 1987, and then from there, at 17, basically became a preacher in the AME Church. Now, because of AME Church, all of the churches are connected all over the globe. So before I went to college, I had probably preached across the country. And then by the time I finished college, across the world. And
college is Morehouse?
College is Morehouse. Became something of a prince of the church. And all that means is someone who they identified, who the fathers and the bishops really took an interest in. And I had men of incredible gifts and talent and insight and vision just pour into me, give me enormous opportunity. And that's what led to my calling.
Let's talk more about the roots of the AME. Richard Allen is my favorite historical preacher.
Okay.
Not
wow,
black
really?
preacher, not favorite historical preacher, period.
Sure.
Hopefully I can get Richard Newman on his podcast. He wrote the book Freedom Prophet about Allen.
Sure.
I understand the political aspect of it and the structural differences that may be in the perspective, but how familiar were you growing up of the historical significance of the AME Church?
Primarily, and I surely don't want to give the impression that because of how the church was organized.
You didn't. You didn't.
No. I tell people all the time, I was nurtured in the soul of African Methodism. I am committed to its precepts, was shaped by its values and inspired by its ideals.
What are their values?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
My father was actually a Baptist. He was one of y'all, right? But his 8th grade math teacher, a woman named Agnes Hildebrand in Orangeburg, South Carolina, said, "You're far too intelligent. Ain't trying to throw shade, to be a jackleg." So she said, "You should go to school."
Far too intelligent to be a Baptist.
No, she said a jackleg.
Okay. I was trying to see where we're going with this.
Jackleg in the South just meant uneducated, untrained preacher.
Gotcha.
Now, you happen to be a Baptist, but those two things, were not synonymous in her mind.
Yeah.
But for her, she was like, you need to be like my boys. All of her boys were AME. And so my dad decided to convert at 17 to become an AME. principally because at the time in Orangeburg, South Carolina is very unique in South Carolina. It actually has 2 colleges, Claflin College and South Carolina State. As a result, during the early 60s, it was really a hotbed for the civil rights movement, in which my father was very, very involved. In fact, there was a famous march called the Orangeburg Massacre, where a bunch of high school students tried to integrate a department store called Crest in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and the police came. Many people think it was really the incipient element that led to at least the civil rights movement in South Carolina. My father was deeply,
Say that
deeply
one more time,
involved.
last part again.
What?
Say the last part again.
So the revolution, the sit-ins at Crest Department Store, many people believe in South Carolina, it was one of the incipient movements that led to the civil rights movement among college students in
sit-ins and things of that nature.
In Orangeburg. And my father was deeply involved in that. And the leader of that element at the time was the pastor of the AME church in town. So my father was deeply involved and invested in that and inspired by those ideals. In fact, the first time you heard Martin Luther King Jr. speak was at a rally at South Carolina State in the 60s when he was 18 years old.
Wow.
So it was out of that, their commitment to civil rights, their commitment to education, their commitment to empowerment that led my dad to, when he finished college, to go to seminary ITC in Atlanta. And for him, social protests, an educated clergy, a commitment to the social dimension of the gospel was just intrinsic. It's the air I breathe. It's the water I swim in. It reminds me of the 2 fish who were swimming in water, and they swim past an old fish, and the old fish says, "How's the temperature of the water today?" And the young fish say, "What's water?" Like that, they're in it so deep they don't even know what it is. So for me, the AME church was profound, and a lot of stuff I took for granted as normative, I found out was not.
What did you take for granted?
Let's start with an educated clergy.
Gotcha.
I thought all preachers went to school because in the AME church,
you have to
be ordained, and there are 2 levels of ordination. So I accepted my call. I preached my trial sermon when I was 17. I didn't get my second ordination, which allows you to pass it, until I was 26. You have to graduate from high school. You have to go to college. You have to go to seminary. And then you also have to go to what they call a mandated ministerial institute every Saturday for 5 years that's taught by the other pastors. So I'm 17, getting taught social ethics by Congressman Floyd Flake.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So let's start there. The idea that the church is not a museum, that it's not a place where the old, the sick, the depressed, and the oppressed and the depressed come to lament their fate. It's a place where you come to learn how to make a difference. So my father's extended family is from Orangeburg. Orangeburg is in the middle of South Carolina, about 100 miles from Charleston. Charleston, South Carolina, is probably where 80% of the slaves who were captured in the African slave trade were brought into America. There's a preacher down there named Denmark Vesey. Right? Denmark Vesey, along with Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, one of the 3 individuals who actually were architects of the only slave rebellions that we know in America. And Denmark Vesey was an ordained deacon in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. After his capture and death, the state of South Carolina outlawed the AME Church until the Civil War. So that history, those ideals, that perspective, that point of view is endemic to who I am.
You talked about the civil rights, you talked about the education, then you also said empowerment. What do you mean by AME having one of their pillars as being empowerment?
They just believed that church didn't end on Sunday after the benediction. They believe it was your job to impact every aspect of individuals' lives. In fact, one of my mentors told me, never have to preach to eat. That your job as a preacher is to prepare yourself to learn how the society and the structures of the society that you live in work, so you can be a change agent within those structures with the people that you serve. And so that means in the AME Church, the oldest Black college in America is Wilberforce University.
I went to Wilberforce for 2 years.
Yeah, it was founded by the AME Church, Bishop named Daniel Alexander Payne.
Yeah.
So the AME Church has always been at the forefront of educational efforts, of economic efforts, anything designed to enhance people's lives. They see that as an outgrowth of our commitment to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
I see two ironies in that. Quickly, one, you said believed. You talked in past tense.
Mm-hmm.
Was that an assessment that AME has lost some of those things currently?
I think, as is the case with most organizations, ministries, if you're not careful, it's very easy to allow other issues, concerns, preoccupations to kind of cloud your primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some instances in the AME Church, that is the case. I would not cast that aspersion on the entire denomination.
Absolutely.
But I think that there are pockets, enough of them, where many of us who were nurtured in its soil and adopted its ideals and inspired by its vision became a little frustrated and decided we could pursue those same ideals in a context that was more favorable.
Yeah, and I think also as the world shifts to anti-structure, I think there's inherently sometimes difficulties trying to operate within, especially large structural, be it religion, be it corporate. You know, most of our big technical companies are birthed out of independence. You know, Bill Gates with Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, now Instagram. So I think a lot of times we kind of forget that just with the shifting times.
No, I think that's a very helpful perspective. And I would add to that, the AME Church, again, is 200, right? 1787, you know, to today. So 200 plus years old, 225, 230 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the structure was birthed in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, that means the people who served in it, I think, were ministering to people who were in a much more limited context.
Mm-hmm.
So you take my dad, you know, of course, he doesn't have the options that I have. And so the bishop comes to him and says, well, you have to move. Well, guess what? He gonna move, because what else he's gonna do? Bishop come to me and say, you gotta move. I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know, so I think the structure that has allowed it to last so long, I think it needs to be adjusted, because it was birthed in an environment where, you know, people of color didn't have the same level of options that we have now. I think it's the same issue with the Black college, right? You know, when I decided I wanted to go to Morehouse, my father was very upset. You know what he said to me? He said, we only went to Black colleges because we had to. You have an opportunity to go to, you know,
wherever you want to go.
Wherever you want to go. Why would you do that? So I think a lot of times, I was just reading this the other day. You know, there are two fundamental forces in economics, right? Monopoly and competition. I think for many, many years, the Black church, the Black college, the Black bank, they had a monopoly because we didn't have no options. But when you have options, if all you're bringing to the table is the fact that we Black, and you don't represent anything else, I think you're going to have a challenge remaining relevant.
Well, I think there's two things with that as well. That's the irony of empowerment. So if I'm teaching you to be empowered, eventually that empowerment is going to happen to the very institution that taught me empowerment.
Right.
So
absolutely,
it's parenthood almost.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, you know,
work yourself out of job.
Yeah. Where's my baby going? They're going to get married.
Yeah.
They're going to get a house now. And, you know, that withdrawal syndrome and things that happens with that. I think also when I think about how you're describing at its peak the historical structure of the AME Church. really what you're describing at its peak is the black church in general.
Absolutely.
Which the AME church is the orchestrator
Pioneer,
and you take creator and curator, is creator and curator of not just the black church, but black institutionalism.
Sure.
Because of Allen and because of Allen actually lived out everything you said.
Sure.
Educated man.
Businessman.
Left all his kids' property. Lost unjustly Bethel, the building, the property, went back and bought it on an auction and bought extra rental property.
And it's still there today.
And this is the 1700s.
It's the oldest piece of property continuously owned by African Americans in the Western Hemisphere.
Period. And, you know, Newman in his book on Freedom Prophet talks about how it's birthed. And it's always this suggestion that he's making that
Who, Newman?
The author Newman about Allen, that Allen was always up to something.
Always.
Yeah. So to the point of having the white preacher come in and preach against slavery to a slave master, opposed to himself.
Right.
But even the walkout, he suggests was a setup. But he makes the statement because it happens while they were on the floor praying. And they walked out and started the black institution, the first black institution on American soil, or as you would say, on the soul of the Western Hemisphere. And it says literally the black church was birthed off his knees.
All day long.
And so
and had a skill. He was a blacksmith.
A blacksmith that worked and a chimney cleaner and a shoemaker.
He was an entrepreneur, an educator, a preacher.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
Allen is and I say historical figure, I'm wrestling with the fact that he may be the most important historical figure in the history of America.
He's definitely on the short list.
I mean, Frederick Douglass, who's on that short list of some people may put first, changed his birthday to be Allen's birthday. He was his mentee. And so it's interesting to see how the fruit of Allen really spread out, even some of the complexities that he had to deal with. You know, him and Absalom Jones split at some point. And seeing that even birthed out in the AME. However, with all that being said, you're not currently AME.
No! I alluded to that in a very nuanced way about 10 minutes ago.
I mean, all these things, these pillars of empowerment and education and civil rights.
Well, I think what happened. I think great question. I think at the heart of African Methodism is this tension. If you look at the AME Church's logo, I think the logo embodies the tension. It's an anvil on top of the cross, right? That didn't really strike me until I read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and Lewis says that one of the issues that Christianity had struggled with is this pseudo shadow Christian movement called Christianity and Christianity and the social movement, Christianity and, like he says, we're always trying to add something to Christianity as if its essence is insufficient. And so when I read that book, immediately it brought to my mind the AME Church logo. It's an anvil on top of the cross. And I think in many instances...
What's the anvil?
The anvil is the piece of steel that a blacksmith uses to hammer weapons. Right? It's a graphical homage to the fact that Allen, was this apostle of self-determination. He was an entrepreneur. He wanted to have his own. Right. And so for him, independence, right? Entrepreneurism, the anvil and the cross. Well, I think often in many AME environments, they are more enamored of the anvil than they are the cross. And so often, I remember my first year in seminary, we were invited to go to South Africa to do a mission trip. It was shortly after.
We're a seminary?
Harvard Divinity School in Cambridge.
Okay. We need to go there because you went to Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard. So shortly after I got there, we went on a mission trip. It was like 20 of us, and preached at all these churches. And I remember having a real problem when I was preparing.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem I had was so much of my preaching up to that point had been exclusively social. Like we call it, ain't it awful preaching.
Mm-hmm.
All the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poor and black people ain't winning like that. And I realized, compared to the South African social dilemma, the stuff that I was talking about, comparatively speaking, was minor. And I had a real struggle because I realized my appreciation of the depth of the gospel was woefully inadequate, because up to that point it was principally social. But I said to myself, what do I say to people who have been suffering from apartheid? Apartheid ain't Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I say? And then I realized, as one of my mentors said, if you can't preach it, in Lagos and Los Angeles, it's not the gospel. So even though my appreciation of the gospel has been through the anvil, how much of my faith is in the anvil and how much of it is in the cross? What is the difference between, as we focus on empowerment, which is important, what is the difference between the AME Church and the Urban League? What's the difference between the AME Church and the NAACP? Are we just a community development corporation that meets on Sunday? Or is there something deeper to our commitment that includes the social, but fundamentally is about the spiritual? That became a real dilemma for me.
Yeah.
And I think that what happened, to your point, once we are empowered, right? Once we have received or achieved a certain measure of social progress, what then does the gospel look like for me? And so I felt as though many of our answers to that question were dated, and that there were other expressions of that commitment that were more relevant. And I decided that I wanted to cast my lot with them.
Do you think that sometimes, maybe subconsciously, those, not just AME, but those who hold the banner of social justice,
Hide behind the banner of social justice.
Hide behind it or hold it up, or are subconsciously looking for ills to maintain their relevancy?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There was a famous intellectual who I will not name, who before we had a black president was constantly talking about how America needed to, grow up, how we needed to embrace our diversity, right? They had conferences about it all over the country, all over the world, saying how important America needed to mature. So we finally get a candidate, and this intellectual decides that he doesn't want to support him.
Oh, you're talking about Cornel West.
Oh, is that
Gotcha.
who I'm talking about?
But, but I think it's important to say names, because a lot of times,
well,
I know people
Professor
have the
West.
propensity to,
No,
I don't know how
I
people
know
have the
Professor West.
propensity.
He taught me
Yeah.
at he taught me at Harvard.
Harvard, yeah.
I took several classes of his.
You went to Harvard, Ivy League.
I was befuddled because I'm not understanding, and now he's running for president, which is a whole nother layer of complexity, whole nother level of nuance. It was just amazing to me. Like, okay, so you can complain, like, so to your point, I think we confuse. It's easier to throw rocks than to build houses.
Yeah, and I think the searching for it blinds you to the actual legitimate complexities. I mean, you have you heard, we're in the midst of, I don't know when we're going to air this, election, and I haven't, maybe you have, maybe our viewers have heard anybody talk about education. We talk economics, but we know that economics are highly tied, especially in the context of America, to education. We hear about mass shootings, which are disguised as non-black on black crime, but you don't hear anything talking about mass shootings as it relates to impoverished black and brown communities. So it's not as if you and I are suggesting that there are not social plights out there that need to be addressed. It's just that sometimes they almost are only those that can be marketed. Like morality is only abortion.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, like there's so many other things. If you were about pro-life, about saving children, maintaining the strong family values, that you would hit besides abortion and gays.
Racism is a very easy target when you have a water fountain and you sitting in the back of the bus. Right. That's one type of racism, right? But how do you deal with the type of racism that manifests itself as microaggression when the security follows you around when you're walking through the department store?
Or Four Seasons.
You know, like that's a different, it's a more nuanced manifestation of the same issue that I'm not sure marching can always address. You know, speaking of this conversation, right? One of the candidates for governor in North Carolina, you know, is an avowed Christian, right? African American, espousing all of these moral positions, castigating those who don't agree with him. And this guy got a rap sheet
right,
longer than one of the candidates for president, and he's black, right? So the question becomes, how do you hold him accountable, right? When we come from an environment where you didn't have to be right to be an Ebony and Jet, you just had to be black. Oh, and both of them are out of business too.
Right.
Thank you for joining us on Nuanced Conversations. We invite you to return next week as we continue this dialogue. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and share this conversation with others who may find it valuable. Until next time.